Hi, my name is Tori Carnes, and our group will be presenting on the topic of medically fragile students in the classroom. Now I want you to close your eyes for a moment and imagine this scene with me. You're sitting in a familiar chair, the one that you've been wheeled around in for most of your life. You watch the other children run and play, as you often do, wishing that you could join them, but you can't, at least not in quite the same way. You have a nurse by your side, who often stays with you throughout the day. This is because you have to use various devices such as a catheter and an intravenous feeding tube. She helps you manage these devices as well as monitor your overall health. You wonder how you could ever hope to be included in a classroom when you can't seem to find any traces of normal compared to these other kids. Okay, you can open your eyes now. So this is one example of what it might be like for someone who is medically fragile in the classroom. As a teacher, it's important that we understand the challenges and struggles surrounding these students, as well as the strategies we can use to best help them. Hopefully, our presentation will give you a better idea of how to best support these students.
Hi, my name is Alexis Matthews, and I'll be discussing what a medically fragile child is. So, a medically fragile child is defined as a child whose medical conditions or health problems require 24-hour supervision from a skilled nurse. Often, they're not able to care for themselves and need help with basic activities such as bathing and feeding themselves, regardless of age. Medically fragile children sometimes need medical equipment to keep them alive. Some may require a skilled nurse to monitor their heart rate or breathing constantly. Others need to be hooked to a ventilator or be tube fed. They may need continuous physical therapy, a urinary catheter, or orthotics. There are many things that can cause a child to become medically fragile. The most common are fetal alcohol syndrome, birth defects, developmental disorders, and parental neglect. It's also common in children with debilitating chronic illnesses such as cancer, epilepsy, chronic respiratory diseases, and Down syndrome. Caring for a medically fragile child is physically and emotionally demanding. They need someone to constantly watch them in case of seizures or if the child stops breathing. There are also several things to consider when working with a medically fragile child, such as becoming familiarized with the child's medical conditions, becoming familiarized with how to care for the child, and how to deal with side effects from the medications, which will be discussed later in our presentation and in our paper.
In order for medically fragile children to have the best quality of life possible, they should be included in the general classroom. And that does not mean that they are merely physically present in the general classroom, but that they have a sense of belonging and acceptance. Teachers can ensure that their medically fragile students are included in 5 ways. They can understand the disability, they can adapt their materials and equipment, they can give them control, they can keep transitions smooth, and they can teach life skills. Understanding the disability will aid in the teachers' empathy and compassion because they will know what the students are dealing with. They can also know how to help the student as much as possible, and they can teach the other students empathy and compassion. Adapting the materials and equipment. A specific way to do this is to employ book stands, large paper to hold the book in place at the child's level, and large paper clips and chip clips to hold the book open. This will just help the child learn on their own as much as possible. Give them as much control over their learning and environment as possible. This will boost their self-esteem, happiness, and feeling of normality. It's also just another way to treat the child with dignity and respect. A practical way of doing this is let the child learn as much as possible on their own. Let them generate their own solutions and ideas to problems. Another way to do this is employ an electric page turner, so the child can just flip a switch and the page turns, so they don't just have to be constantly asking for help. Another way is to let them play outside. Let them go out with their peers during recess. This gives them the benefits of fresh air and just helps them feel as normal as possible. Fourth, keep your transitions as smooth as possible between activities and subjects, classrooms, and the cafeteria. This just helps them feel calm and safe. Be predictable. Write what you're going to do, like on the chalkboard, so that they know what to expect. This just helps them feel calm and safe. Fifth and final, the medically fragile child should be taught life skills such as mobility, motor skills, self-care skills. This just helps with their social and emotional adjustments, and also just also sets them up for a life as independent as possible in the future. But But it's not just up to teachers to help their medically fragile students to be included in the classrooms. It's also up to schools, and schools can do this in 3 ways. They can acquire the necessary technology, they can create the least restrictive environment, and they can be familiar with their state's laws and policies. Acquiring the necessary technology should be done to support these kids as much as possible. The most common technology to be acquired is our communication devices, usually speech devices, which are just speech boards and that tablet, or writing devices, which are like teachers' aids or computers. Creating a least restrictive environment, specifically, this can be done by designing the classroom and school facilities, such as the bathroom, playground, and cafeteria, to be as easily negotiable and accessible as possible to children with all abilities. Another way to do this is to put in place policies against discrimination. This will just assist not only with the outside world, but also with teachers in aiding them in teaching their students compassion with the medically fragile students. Third and finally, schools can be familiar with their state's laws and policies. This will just help them not to accidentally violate one, and to become entangled in a lawsuit, but we will discuss this at a later juncture. So pretty much the ultimate goal of inclusion is to make everyone feel welcome and secure, and to help everyone learn as successfully as possible. But just keep in mind, when including medically fragile students in the classroom, just to treat them with dignity and respect, because they are human beings created in the image of God, and they should be treated as such.
Hi, I'm Elsa Cole, and I will be talking about some laws and acts that go into a medically fragile child's life and school life. It all starts out with IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And to make sure I get it right, I'm going to read this off. And this is the main federal law concerned with children with special health care needs. It is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. This is really important in any child's life, and definitely for a medically fragile child. This will give them the same rights and the same abilities and resources at school that any other child would be able to have. And this also gives them the opportunity for physical therapy, occupational therapy, health and nursing services, and speech therapy, which is also very important in their lives for development. Next, we are going to be talking about a least restrictive environment. Another part of IDA is a least restrictive environment, and this is where medically fragile children can still be taught in a normal classroom unless it is hindering their learning abilities. That is the only reason why you wouldn't teach in a least restrictive environment, or you wouldn't try to. Some reasons for LRE, least restrictive environment: children with special health care needs will be stigmatized if they are removed from the regular classroom and treated differently. Keeping children with their non-disabled peers will ensure the same high expectations for both types of students, and it's important for students with special health care needs to have peer interactions with non-disabled students. So this will help in all aspects of the classroom environment for the medically fragile child. They will feel included, they will be able to learn with their peers, and of course it will be more fun than being in a separate classroom. Health records are also very important. HIPAA, Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. This establishes privacy standards related to sharing health information. Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is also very important. Every school district annually needs to notify parents and eligible students of their right to inspect and review their children's education records of their own. This is important so families and students know how their child is doing during school, and they have the right to have access to those papers and anything that they need for their education. And lastly, negligence. Negligence can be a huge thing for medically fragile children. Just with the disabilities that they have, it is easy to be negligent. There are 4 elements that need to be present for a nurse or teacher to have been negligent. 1, a legally recognized duty to conform to a certain standard of conduct. for the protection of others against reasonable risks. 2. A breach of duty, example, a failure on the part of an individual to conform to the standard. 3. A reasonably close causal connection between the conduct and the resulting injury, often referred to as a proximate cause. And lastly, an actual loss or damage to the interests of others. Negligence can be pretty bad for some of these students, and I think these laws will help. They do help, and they will help future students in every aspect of their learning abilities. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Thank you.
The medically fragile child refers to a child with specific healthcare needs who requires complex health procedures, specific therapies, or individualized medical equipment or supplies to assist them in their day-to-day activities. So what this means is that they need to have medical procedures sometimes at school, and they need to be supported and supervised by somebody who is a qualified medical professional. So that what that means also is that the school nurse will be very much involved in the care of this student, and that person will be responsible for delegating and overseeing any and all tasks that are there to assist in the care of this child. So I'm just going to share my screen now. So medical care of the medically fragile child in the classroom. Oops. So who cares for the child? In most states, the medical care for any child must come from a state certified medical professional. And this person is responsible for all of the tasks to care for this child. There are 6 steps of standards of practice, and they're outlined here. You can see assessment, diagnosis, outcomes identification, planning, implementation, and evaluation. And that comes from both the National Association of School Nurses and the American Nurses Association. And so that dictates the standards of care that they have to follow. So with assessment and diagnosis, this means that the school nurse collects data from the child's doctors, and then they provide a nursing diagnosis. So it's not a medical diagnosis, but just what they're going to be doing with the child at school, and that determines the care provided for the child. Outcomes identification and planning. The school nurse identifies a personalized expected outcome for the child so that they can create an individualized healthcare plan. So this is their IHCP. And this plan of action details the specific interventions that will help to achieve the expected outcomes. Implementation and evaluation. The school nurse implements the outlined plan of action and periodically evaluates the student's progress towards the expected outcome. So basically just checking in with them, making sure that they're carrying out the tasks that need to happen for the child's health. The school nurse is the primary care person at the school, and as a qualified medical professional, they have a lot of legal responsibilities. And so that means that they are the most responsible. All medical care decisions have to go through them, even if tasks are delegated to other people. So they're responsible for training anyone that is overseeing the child on the appropriate procedures, and for identifying emergency protocol and when how to recognize an emergency situation. They also have to create individual plans for each student, and that has to include recording information pertaining to the student with standardized forms, nurse intake forms, medical alert sheets. And so this makes sure that everyone is aware of what is happening with the child at all times. Other considerations include training staff on identifying and providing for emergency procedures, providing training for basic first aid and CPR, training on administration of medications when it's appropriate, providing training on current health issues, and then looking after how to care for hazardous waste. So the school nurse is legally responsible and can be held liable if the student should be harmed due to negligence, regardless of
tasks being delegated. So no matter who has done it, the school nurse is always the number one person responsible. The school boards are also responsible for ensuring that schools are adequately staffed in order to provide for all necessary medical services.
We hope you enjoyed our presentation on medically fragile students in the classroom, and hopefully you were able to glean some helpful information that will benefit you in the future. As teachers become informed about inclusion strategies, health procedures, legal information, and the various factors that are involved in working with these students, then they can work to advocate for them and support them in the best ways possible. We must find ways to show these students that they are loved and cared for despite their physical setbacks, because they are valuable and important human beings created in the image of God. Thank you.